Hello there, I'm Jon Kirkman. I'm a broadcaster and journalist based in the UK, and I'm going through some new releases, one of my latest little films of something that you may like to see, and this is it. It's not quite out yet. I think it's out next week, which is, what is it, the 16th of April? Something like that, anyway. It is, of course, the 1980 album from Jethro Tull, fully expanded. This is Jethro Tull A la mode. There you go. And it's a 6 disc set. There are a couple of DVDs in here and some CDs, but also one of the most important things in amongst all this is the live album. I think that's the live album there. There's a double live album, and the great thing is Stephen Wilson's been very, very on board with doing all this. I know he said he was only going to do the 70s, but as Ian Anderson said, that he's managed to persuade him to do this, which was 1980, and Broadsword and the Beast. That is coming down the tubes in 2022, I believe, and Ian Anderson said that is going to be the ultimate fan gift for a Jethro Tull fan, because a lot of people love Broadsword and the Beast, and Ian Anderson has a very, very soft spot for it as well. There you go. Hey, there's the lineup. Totally different lineup from the previous album, and if I'm honest, it's a totally different sound. We've got Ian Anderson, Martin Barr, of course, from the long-standing, and then we've got Dave Pegg, who joined for the tour to promote Stormwatch, and then we also have Eddie Jobson on keyboards, and also Mark Cranny on drums. So there's a bit of a different sound, and I did an interview with Ian recently, which you'll be able to hear. And just check out my Facebook pages, because it'll be all over there. And it's a 40-minute interview about this and about going out, COVID, going on tour, and also talking at the end of the forthcoming, which should be about 2022, of Broadsword and the Beast. But we do a lot of talking about this album. And again, as I said, one of the most important things was the live album. It's a double live album done at the time in LA. But here's something. There you go. Slipstream, which at the time was a very, very important thing, because it was the first time Jethro Tull had released a commercially available video. Now, like a lot of bands, Jethro Tull recorded promo clips for TV programs like Top of the Pops, The Old Grey Whistle Test, and all over the world. And he said that started back in the 60s when artists were out on tour and they couldn't make it back to England for Top of the Pops, or make it to America for the Ed Sullivan Show, or things like that. So they started making videos then. Of course, they became a lot more sophisticated and groundbreaking towards the middle of the 70s. And of course, everybody mentions the Queen video, Bohemian Rhapsody, which indeed in the interview Ian Anderson mentions as well. But regarding I always thought it was a very, very different sounding album, because a couple of members one had left, Barrymore Barlow, or Barry Barlow as he was known. He'd left. He finished with Jethro Tull at that point. Although the friendship went on, a lot of people seem to think at the time that Ian just sacked them. It was the record company decision. This was originally going to be a solo album from Ian Anderson, hence the A, which stood for Anderson. And it looks like he's just switched the lineup of Jethro Tull, but that was purely down to the record company. And he said, I wish I'd done it a little bit differently then, and maybe dug in my heels and just, look, it's a solo album. But he said it is what it is, and it came out as a Jethro Tull album. But he said the door was never closed to people like David Palmer, who is now, of course, Dee Palmer, and Barry Barlow, and John Evans. But John Evans as well had sort of, he said maybe come across and said, like, well, yeah, I don't know whether I want to carry on, really. But he said, I've worked with them all since. He said the friendship remains. So he said the door, as far as I was concerned, was never shut. You get all that in this wonderful book. It's difficult for me to show you. You get things like that. There's a lot of the info there about the recording. Now, at the time, his previous album had been very ecologically sort of related, and covered subjects relating to ecology and things like that. But these booklets that you get in these Jethro Tull box set, there is a wealth of information, and the whole story is told from start to finish. And Ian Anderson has a very hands-on approach. That's Mark Cranny there, who was the drummer at the time. It's the only album that Mark played on. Of course, sadly, he's no longer with us. But Yeah, and the keyboard sound was very different because Eddie Jobson was on board. Now, Eddie was some kind of, I don't know, musical wonder kid. He really was. He was only, I think, 24 when he actually joined Jethro Tull, although he didn't actually join Jethro Tull. Does that make sense? No, he was only a guest on the solo album, so he's technically credited as a guest, but of course he would have only been a guest on Ian Anderson's solo album anyway. Hey, look, what's in a name? I saw them on this tour and he was in the band playing on stage, so as far as I'm concerned, Eddie was a member of the band, although he's credited as a special guest. Again, that's the lineup. That's how they looked when the album came out. Would you buy a used car from these gentlemen? Actually, I probably would. They look a decent bunch. There's loads of extras on here, like I said, loads of outtakes and live stuff. I remember some of these photos here, like in the press, and it was actually a new decade, of course, the 80s. And there are a lot of people out there. There you go. That's Ian, being very hirsute with his acoustic guitar. It's on the tour, and a lot of people thought it was a big change for Tull. I guess it was, but that's what bands do when they change members. The sound changes purely and simply because it's a different musician and usually playing different instruments. And Ian goes into all the reasons and the whys and the wherefores. I remember that was I think that was the cover of a single, which might have been Farmingdale Flyer, or it might have been Working John, Working Joe, but it was definitely a single cover, that one. As I said, Slipstream. Now, David Mallet, who did a lot of videos back in the late 70s, early 80s, he did this. Now, you may remember that Tull also had a very firm footing in the film world. They were doing promo films right the way back as far as Aqualung and Thick as a Brick. And if you remember rightly, War Child was meant to be the soundtrack of a film. And I don't think they actually got to do any filming for War Child. The next big thing was the TV performance of Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die, which again was filmed by Mike Mansfield, who was a very, very popular TV producer at the time, had a TV show called Supersonic. But Slipstream was the very first commercially available VHS film. And some of the effects look very dated now, but you have to bear in mind, in 1980, video really was in its infancy. Of course, nowadays, and certainly through the 80s, I mean, this was pre-MTV and VH1 and all that, but nowadays, videos can be very, very sophisticated or beautifully ramshackle, sometimes because they've gone the other way. If you're going to go, well, this is kind of the early days, so it's primitive in itself, but the performances are great. But once MTV came along, they started getting a little more sophisticated until you started making features like Michael Jackson did, and other people like Paul McCartney, and all these big bands made these really big features. And then there was a move back to let's make it just make it look like somebody with a camcorder in a warehouse or whatever. But it's still a wonderful artifact. It really is. And I've watched it a couple of times since. And yeah, some of the effects, the purple sky and things like that, because of course the Cold War was at its height in 1980. And there was the fear of a nuclear bomb going off. And it's portrayed in some of the videos here, and the effects are very, very primitive. But they were very up design. At the time, they were very cutting edge, although Ian Anderson said he can't take the credit for the film because it was really down to Chris Wright, who was at Chrysalis, and there was Chrysalis TV at the time, and he thought, oh, this could be good, bearing in mind that Jethro Tull were on Chrysalis. Ellis and Wright, who managed Jethro Tull, also owned Chrysalis Records. But there you go. This is absolutely wonderful. 6 discs. This is going to keep you occupied for quite some time. It's out in about a week's time, so by the sort of middle of April, end of April, you'll be able to buy this at your online retailer. If any of the shops are open, which I believe in the UK they will be. I think in other areas, particularly America, it is already. You are able to buy it in the shops. So, what can I say? Another one of these wonderful Jethro Tull box sets. And I've got them all so far. And I really do love going through them and playing them. And I'm really excited about Broadsword and the Beast being done, and apparently it's going to be more than 6 discs according to Ian Anderson. That interview, check out my Facebook website. There's a few pages there. Tales from the Prog Vault, Classic Rock Radio, Jon Kirkman books, and Jon Kirkman, JonKirkman. There'll be news of that interview going up on the Listen Again file. And it's an exclusive interview with Ian talking about it. It's about 40 minutes long, so we had a good chat about this, and just before this with the Stormwatch tour, and then obviously looking ahead and also touring as well. He seems to think that the tour in September in the UK will go ahead. Fingers crossed that happens, but at this moment in time, I think people are literally just coming out of their shell and sort of poking their heads over the parapet. We don't know 100%. I think a lot of it depends on the pandemic, of course, and the vaccinations. If people have had vaccinations, then we're looking to maybe open up that sort of performing side of things for people in theatres, but we still don't know yet, and it does take a time for the vaccine to, if you like, sort of become distributed enough so enough people can go and see these gigs. And as Ian said himself, he said we want everybody to be safe. We want people to be able to come and see these gigs and be safe as well, not have to worry about maybe catching COVID, and God forbid that they do. But I think it's moving in the right direction. Ian certainly seems to think at the moment that the tour in September of the UK will take place. We'll wait and see. But I know a lot of people will be definitely wanting to go and see Jethro Tull on tour. In the meantime, though, to whet your appetite, you've got this. And it's a slightly different sounding Jethro Tull. It's got a lot of the things that you liked about Jethro Tull back in the day. It's still got Martin Barr on guitar, and it's got Ian Anderson, of course. The new members, Mark Cranny and Eddie Jobson, make the sound a little bit different, but it's not a bad thing. It's really, really good. So there you go. Jethro Tull A la mode. So you get all the extras, and you get some rather fine video footage in there as well. Thanks for watching this film, and I'll see you again with something else, no doubt, very soon. Thanks for watching.